If your goal is a long, healthy life and optimal health, having just normal blood pressure is simply not the full story. Normal just means they are not in a high risk category by definition. But many people live with normal numbers and still develop heart and brain vessel disease as they age. So the more useful question for the optimal healthy life is what blood pressure range is linked to the lowest vascular aging so that our arteries, our brain circulation, and our kidneys stay in the best possible shape as long as possible. The reality is that the risk for developing cardiovascular diseases doesn't just start with the label of hypertension. The data from large studies also show that the risk of dying from heart disease or stroke also starts to climb once the systolic, the high number, goes above 115. So we know that for true health optimization, blood pressure that's up to 120 over 80 is normal. But we know that blood pressure that's lower, if you can tolerate it well without getting dizzy or lightheaded or if you are not falling, is considered much better. When we look at people with the best vascular health, such as those who have been practicing healthy lifestyle habits for decades, we often see that many very fit people run their systolic blood pressure somewhere between 90 and 110. Now, there is one number that gets frequently overlooked, and that's the diastolic blood pressure, the lower number. This number still does matter for optimal health. Now, for lots of adults, a solid diastolic zone is around 70 to 80, especially when the top number is already under control. And in adults under about 60, the diastolic can actually tell you a lot about their future risk. Now, if the diastolic is running high, like in 80s and especially above 90s, that can actually signal higher resistance in the smaller arteries, and that pattern has been linked to higher risk for heart attacks and strokes. But too low can also be a problem, mainly as people get older. If the diastolic blood pressure gets pushed down under about 60, and especially in older adults or people with stiff arteries, studies link that kind of scenario with worse outcomes. So the practical takeaway is that for the purpose of optimal healthy life, we want the top number to be low, but we don't want the bottom number to be completely crushed either. In younger people, high diastolic pressure is a real warning sign. In older people, the bigger danger is when the systolic or the higher number is high. But what we also want to watch for is to make sure that the diastolic blood pressure is not too low. So the key point is that low blood pressure is healthy only if it's steady and is not causing any side effects like dizziness. Now let's apply this longevity goal to real life. For elderly individuals over the age of 65 who are in good health, the goal is to keep the blood pressure below generally 130 over 80. If the patient can tolerate this kind of blood pressure without any issues, the ultimate targeted blood pressure is really driven at that point based on individual tolerance and should be based on symptoms and the overall risk. So for the elderly people who can keep their blood pressure naturally low and feel good without dizziness or weakness, for them this low blood pressure is generally seen as a sign of a healthy heart. Now, there was an interesting study called Women's Health Initiative. The results of the study were quite interesting because it showed that women who kept their systolic blood pressure, which is the top number, between 110 and 130 had a higher likelihood of living to be 90 years old. Now, it's also important though to mention that some studies suggest that women may see their cardiovascular risk increase when their blood pressure, the higher number of the blood pressure, goes over 110. But again, it's not one time fits all cutoff, and it may not be applicable to all women. Now, when medication is necessary to maintain the blood pressure within normal range, then the goal becomes pretty straightforward. Most clinicians recommend keeping the blood pressure below 130/80. Now, if people can tolerate it well, meaning no dizziness, lightheadedness, falls, many clinicians recommend keeping the blood pressure even less than 120. Now, when the blood pressure is in the lower range, that's where we are putting less daily wear and tear on the arteries in our brain and our kidneys.